Hello, everyone. I'm Trent Loos. Welcome to Loose Trails and Tales. We take an extended look at the people and the places in rural America that truly make it what it is. Loose Trails and Tales made possible by Superior Livestock Auction. The video royale sale throughout the rest of, this week. 158,000 head of cattle will be offered for sale. Details can be found at superiorlivestock.com. The All-American Beef Battalion continuing to say thank you to our nation's troops, active and retired, so to speak. We've got one today, by the way. Steaksfortroops.com to get involved with the activities to say thank you with a 1-pound ribeye. And speaking of a 1-pound ribeye, the folks at Lone Creek Cattle Company would invite you to get more details about being a part of the supply chain for the certified Piedmontese business. LoneCreekCattleCo.com. It's interesting, yesterday on Monday, Marty and I got into this discussion about the Second Amendment. I am a proponent of the Second Amendment, although I think we should talk about the Bill of Rights, the rights that we have as American citizens, and not single any amendment out. And then I got a phone call yesterday afternoon, and that person is joining us today. Greg Vanderneck, joining us from Henderson, Nebraska. Did I get that right, Greg?
You bet you did.
First of all, thank you for your service to our country, a veteran of the United States military. Which branch?
It was United States Air Force, and I really appreciate you saying that. What I say is I have the greatest boss in the whole world. It's the American people, and I love them.
Mm-hmm. Why did you join the Air Force?
My dad was a pilot, and I was familiar with the Air Force way of life. And as a young man, I really felt called to serve the country and defend the Constitution.
Yeah, there's too many people that are completely ignorant and don't care about the Constitution these days. Are we making any progress in that regard?
It's slow, and it's very, very painful because I think we've hit a low point. And current events would show that our Department of Justice and our FBI and many of the judges up in D.C. really hold the Constitution in contempt. So, I have some hopeful things, but in the big picture, maybe we're at a low point and getting ready to start coming up, but only if people recognize it and fight.
To your point, and I think it was such a defining moment for me when we lost Supreme Court Justice Scalia. They referred to him as a constitutional justice. Well, who on the Supreme Court's not a constitutionalist?
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit. When we discover that they're not, which I think is discoverable at this point, it's pretty clear. The real issue at hand here is what is the accountability process? I mean, it's inside the document. It's inside our heads and our hearts as Americans. But we really did arrive at a point in time where we look at somebody like Scalia and say, he's a constitutional proponent. He's a defender of the Constitution. We look at our military members, and fundamentally we know that they're defending the Constitution. But when people attack the Constitution, we've lost the grip on holding people accountable. So I genuinely think that's where we're at.
Mm-hmm. You were teaching school for 6 years, I believe you shared with me. You're no longer teaching school. Why did you quit?
So I took a different path, and so I don't like to say I quit, but I did quit. And the reason I quit was I began to have discussions about school safety. It was in the year after the Sandy Hook incident. Mm-hmm. And so those discussions and trying to explain to supervision up through the superintendent and then explain to the students, it just occurred to me, first of all, I'm not feeling right about having my constitutional rights abridged. On the other hand, it's a voluntary thing to come onto the school grounds. So I choose to not be teaching in school, even though I love it, because I'm not comfortable being tasked with defending the children and then having my ability to do so completely removed.
Did you have that discussion with many people before you made that decision?
People in my sphere, my contact sphere, right after Sandy Hook, I made a presentation to my school board, and the superintendent, where I showed them what it would look like to have an armed teacher in the classroom and why that's a preferable defense mechanism to having a cop come into the classroom and have in front of them not only a bad guy, but the backdrop is the teacher and students. It's much preferable to have the teacher with the students being able to defend them in a clear field with a firearm. And I made that presentation. There was more to it. You can tell I know what I'm doing. I made presentations like this multiple times in my military career. I was, in fact, in charge of the section that did exercises for the security forces, and I did test them on just exactly these scenarios. So they were uninterested in my background expertise and uninterested in challenging the law about armed teachers. In fact, I felt uncomfortable publicly in that forum talking about your right to carry, defend yourself, and defend the children appropriately.
About that time in our home state, we had a bill presented that would facilitate armed teachers in schools, qualified armed teachers in schools. And I contacted my senator, my state senator, at that time, Senator Dubas, who we agreed on things about 50% of the time. When I called her about this one, she just point blank said up front, Trent, it doesn't matter how long you talk, how compelling you are, you're not going to get anywhere with me on this one. Well, at least she's open-minded about it. But I think that's the way most people are.
Right.
Most people would be about that, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, they're either one way or the other.
Right. They're already decision made. But what I said to my when I stopped teaching, what I said to my principal with the superintendent there is that I've never violated the law with you, but I'm uncomfortable. I need to fight a different battle. But understand, if a bad guy came into this school and I was breaking the law and I defended every soul on here with a firearm, I don't think you're going to take me to court. Mm-hmm. So you're hypocritical, and we're lying to each other.
Yeah. So we're having this discussion today because you've been presented apparently another challenge in an arena that you would like to carry, exercise your right to carry. Tell us about that.
Yes, I was called for jury duty, and up front I reserved my rights, and I asked for accommodation in order to attend the trial armed. I knew it would be unique or provocative or a combination of the two, but nonetheless, as an oath taker in the United States military, and given my history and the things that we just talked about, and just that alone, I decided to ask the judge to respond in writing why I needed to disarm and enter the courthouse, and in the alternative, release me from jury duty or provide written instructions on how I can serve as an armed juror.
So they did respond to you and tell you that you could not have a carried weapon? You just proactively said, you're going to tell me how I can't.
He just ignored my request and caused his clerk of the court to just continually tell me that I would get my answer when I was in front of the judge for jury duty.
After you went through the security and probably a metal detector.
Right. So
yes. So it doesn't appear to be much of a discussion at that point.
Right. So that's the place where I drew the line, and that's where the conflict stands. So I refused the search, and I asked the judge in writing prior to give me a reason why I should disarm and be searched. So I'm claiming, I think completely correctly, I'm claiming that the judge can ask me to disarm and serve as a juror, but he can't order me to voluntarily disarm and then enter the courtroom. And so the bottom line is, when I said I will not process the security station, the deputy felt that was confrontational, or it wasn't in good order, and so he ordered me to step over to him, and he asked me if there was a problem. I said no to both, stated that I was leaving. I retreated, and I left the courthouse under escort. Mm-hmm. I voluntarily left the courthouse under escort. So subsequent, the judge issued a show cause order for contempt of court that I did not show up for jury duty. I signed in. I talked to the clerk of the court. I asked for written instructions in compliance with my request to the court for a articulated reason that I should be searched, or a written instruction on how I was going to serve as an armed juror. And at that point, when he issued the show cause order, and that I was potentially going to be cited for contempt of court and punished for contempt of court, then that's when I started reaching out to people and saying, "Hey, I'm fighting a decent battle. This is a power game at this point. All of the justice and all of the laws on my side. So how do I get it across smartly, smoothly? Least possible risk, but it obviously is going to cause me stress."
Is there precedent for this, Greg? Have other jurors served? We'll talk about Nebraska because gun laws are state specific.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any precedent for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what occurred to me is both I did not want to casually give up my rights. We are in exceptionally difficult times. It borders on the constitutional phrase of public danger. If not, we're actually in a period of public danger. And I did not want to sacrifice my right to defend myself, let alone be charged with being a court, somebody that's going to defend somebody else's rights or participate in determining what the law says, and then have that be mandatory under court jurisdiction, under an armed guard in the courtroom that serves the court, and not have any capacity at all to actually defend the law or myself or anybody else.
Greg, we have 30 seconds. What's next?
Let's talk further down the road, but eventually we just have to bring some public pressure onto the judge and to bring some public pressure onto the sheriff that they can't execute this kind of bold-face, bull me over and just apply power. They have to apply the law.
Greg Vanderneck from rural Nebraska. We will keep you abreast of what happens with this particular situation. Loose Trails and Tales, always remember, be gentle, stay firm, and read the Constitution this evening.